It's a really remarkable discovery in martial arts that we can use, like I said, anytime you are fighting someone. If you can off balance them, they can't attack you. If you can off balance them, your techniques become much more effective. And if you off balance someone and you go for an attack, it's very hard for them to now counter you with a counter attack.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Alpra.
Hey guys, welcome to the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. And today we're going to discuss Kuzushi. Before we get into Kuzushi, please like, share, subscribe, leave comments, leave reviews wherever you can. It just really helps me gain exposure with the podcast and grow the show. If you want to support the show, check out the links in the bottom. And that's it. And thank you very much for tuning in. So let's discuss Kuzushi. First of all, what is Kuzushi? Kuzushi is the act of breaking someone's balance. More specifically, breaking someone's balance before launching an actual attack. I remember when I was in my early years of jiu-jitsu and I was trying to essentially memorize moves. And when you memorize moves, yes, you do need to know moves. You do need to know variations of moves depending on reactions. But if you're not setting up your moves with an act of breaking your opponent's stance, the moves are quite ineffective. And it's amazing how many people keep trying to do this, even if they train for quite a number of years. They keep trying to just do moves without actually breaking their opponent's stance first. So now, even with the kids, I try to teach them to break their opponent's stance before they do any kind of moves. And when you do that, the moves kind of just appear on their own. So it's almost like a chicken and the egg type thing. You need to have the correct order of operations. So before I start doing any techniques or anything, it's all about making your opponent stumble, making them post their hands on the floor, breaking their posture. What does that mean? What does that look like? So we're going to get into it through today's episode, talk about different examples from the top, the standing, from the bottom position, breaking your opponent's stance. So Kuzushi comes from, it's a noun that comes from a transitive verb in Japan, the verb kuzuzu. And basically what that means is to destroy or pull down, to break down or demolish. And so it's not so much about actually unbalancing as much as it is about breaking the positioning of your opponent. And when you can do that, that is when their bases become compromised, when their stance is broken, that's when attacks can come, right? So Kuzushi is the ability to off balance someone. And we want to think about precursing all of our attacks with Kuzushi. Like I said, doesn't matter what position it's from, but I would say when we talk about Kuzushi, in jiu-jitsu, most people immediately think about judo. When we're standing with our opponent, if we want to throw someone, we have to off balance them first or, create some kind of a reaction. And it's no different in wrestling. Any real grappling sport requires off balancing. Even in striking, there's lots of situations where you'd want to get somebody hopping on one foot or get them to shift their weight to one side. And if you can do that, that certain attacks can't be done because of the shift of their weight has been compromised. The thing about Kuzushi, though, is these opportunities, these windows of attack are very, very small. So if I off balance someone, that off balance window of opportunity may last a second or less than a second. So we really have to train ourselves to know how to break someone's stance and to create predictable reactions by breaking their stance, commonly referred to as like push-pull or action-reaction, which we'll talk about. And once you do this, there's a small window of attack where if you don't strike during that window, now your opponent is going to recover their stance. And just naturally as humans, that's what we do. We generally try to recompose our base and our stance to a vertical position where our head is, in between our legs and where we feel comfortable again. So if I was to grab you by the collar and push you, you're going to stumble backwards and catch yourself. And then basically instantly, you're going to just regain your balance. Okay. And this is the idea of push pull. If I push you, generally your reaction is to push back into me. If I pull you towards me, generally your reaction is to pull yourself away from me, right? Makes sense. So we know this natural human instinct that we've developed since we were kids When we fall over, we try and get back up. When I feel off balanced, my immediate reaction is to stumble and catch myself. And knowing this, we can use this to play different moves against our opponent. If you're really good at breaking someone's stance, you will hit your initial Kuzushi, and as they recover their stance, you're already hitting an attack in the opposite direction, in the direction that they are compensating and trying to rebalance themselves. And really good people with Kuzushi can kind of continuously off-balance someone and then throw them or attack them whenever they want. So you'll see someone stumbling and they're kind of getting jerked around the mat, and the other person's kind of shaking their gi or snapping their head down or trying to attack their legs, making them stumble. And they can just keep this person in this constant cycle of defense until they actually can recompose themselves. We see this in striking as well. If you're attacking someone and you create an angle, now this is what my striking coach talks to me about is this is known as freezing your opponent. So if I, land a strike and I step off to an angle, I've basically frozen you to the point where I have a dominant angle and you are now just trying to recover your position. And when that happens, now the person who has the dominant angle can attack. Okay, my cat's just going to come up. Just going to spray her. So that might happen a couple times during the show. My cat's incredibly needy right now. If you can freeze your opponent by creating a dominant angle, you can now dictate the offensive position, and you can just pepper them with strikes and keep changing angles until they eventually recover their neutral position, which is putting you back in front of them and they've regained their balance. Okay. So we're always looking to get into these offensive cycles in all combat sports. It has to do with getting dominant angles and breaking your opponent's balance. And we want to maximize the amount of time that our opponent is off balanced. All right. So really what Kuzushi is attacking somebody's stance first. Rather than attacking with moves, we attack their stance. And when their stance is broken, this gives us an opportunity to actually be successful with our attacks. So this concept was, most people, I would say, it's mainstream thought that it was invented by Jigoro Kano, the inventor of judo. But, there might be some people who disagree with that. But Jigoro Kano, if you guys don't know, check out some of my previous episodes, the series, The History of BJJ. I talk extensively about Jigoro Kano coming from a Japanese Jiu Jitsu background and then essentially creating the art of what we know today as judo. And the main thing that set Jigoro Kano's system, Kodokan Judo, apart from Japanese Jiu Jitsu is the systems, the effective techniques that were actually safer than the so-called lethal techniques of Japanese jiu-jitsu, and also the concept of Kuzushi, right? The idea of first breaking your opponent's balance and then attacking. And this is what made him and his students such proficient throwers, is they wouldn't be looking for a set number of techniques that they had learned in the gym. They would first be looking to off balance. And this is truly it's a really remarkable discovery in martial arts that we can use, like I said, anytime you are fighting someone. If you can off balance them, they can't attack you. If you can off balance them, your techniques become much more effective. And if you off balance someone and you go for an attack, it's very hard for them to now counter you with a counter attack. Okay, if I don't off balance someone and I go for my attack, because they are in alignment, this relates to Bernanke's alignment principle, posture, structure, base. Kuzushi is the act of breaking someone's posture, bending the spine, pulling them down, breaking their base, making them stumble, right? Making them put their hands on the floor, and breaking their structure. When they put their hands on the floor or when you get off balanced, generally, just naturally, as humans, our hands come away from our body. And so we expose underhooks, our arms become extended, we become susceptible to submissions and things like this. So really what Kuzushi is the idea of breaking someone's alignment, their posture, structure, and base. If I don't break somebody's posture, structure, base, and then I attack, quite often, because their stance has not been compromised first, they are able to launch a counterattack. All right. But if I break somebody's stance and I go for my attack, if the attack doesn't work and I can't chain together a secondary attack, it's still very difficult for my opponent to counter me, which is why this is so important. You always see In the lower ranked divisions, you'll see white belts going for moves, okay? Especially if their school teaches just in moves and they don't actually teach the idea of breaking somebody's stance first. If you attack in moves, you always see these white belts just, they go for something, it doesn't work, and then they end up getting their guard passed, or they end up getting counter thrown. And then you'll see certain white belts where clearly their school discusses the idea of breaking someone down first before even going for any techniques. Or a lot of the time you'll see like a guy with some judo experience in like a white belt or a blue belt division, and he is just ragdolling the other guy on the feet. And you can really see, okay, this guy has a clear understanding of how to first break someone down, which we're going to go into in the episode. So making sure that our emphasis should always be launching attacks on our opponent's stance, their base posture structure first before going into our whatever techniques. So Kuzushi just opens up avenues to launch attacks. Okay. So we already discussed about the consequences of attacking without Kuzushi. Also, just remember that, let's take it to the floor now. If we're on the ground, pin escapes are going to become much more ineffective when we are not using the idea of Kuzushi. A lot of people ask me like, Matt, I'm stuck in side control and I go to try and do my knee elbow escape and it just feels like my opponent, my partner is like 300 pounds. They're on top of me. I can't seem to move them away. I can't create space. What do I need to do? First of all, let's define what a pin is. A pin is my opponent using their body weight to hold me down, but they're not just relying on body weight. They must first get to the inside position. So this requires that, like usually an underhook, you need to get inside of your partner's frames and essentially access them as levers. So if you're framing on me with a knee elbows together, you know, and I'm just lying on you with my body weight, that's not going to do anything. You'll easily be able to just redirect my weight because you have frames in the way. You're dominating the inside space. But if I can get past your knees and get hip to hip, chest to chest, I have an underhook, I have a crossface, I'm dominating all the inside space, now is an appropriate time for the top player to apply body weight, okay? So really, jiu-jitsu is a fight for inside position, especially in no-gi jiu-jitsu. So if I'm going to try to escape a pin, I cannot just, get my guard back. I have to start to get frames back to the inside. If my opponent has a crossface, an underhook, two knees inside my hip and my armpit, they're fully dominating the inside space. The first thing I have to do is I have to off balance them to try and recover one of those inside positions. Generally, if I'm looking to recover to my guard, it's going to be to get my elbow inside their hip from side control, as an example. If I'm looking to wrestle up rather than recover my guard, then I'm looking to get to an underhook. So if they have an underhook on me, I cannot just pummel my hand back into an underhook. It's going to be too tight. They're chest to chest. You have to create some kind of an off balance. And generally, this is where we start teaching beginners about the idea of bridging. So bridging is, I shouldn't have to explain to anyone who's listening to this show. It's so fundamental, but I will anyways, is when I use my feet on the floor to get my hips off the floor. What this does is off balance my partner and gives me the ability to now start creating space, usually by using a kipping movement or a shrimping movement, some kind of movement that I can use to recover the lower. It's going to keep going, guys. So something I can do to recover my lower body positioning, bringing a knee inside, and now my lower body is starting to get back to the inside space. So it's so important that we are off balancing, not just from the standing position, but from the bottom position as well. All right. And when we move our partner around, they now have a choice. A lot of time, if my partner is locking on with crossface and underhook, they're squeezing me super tight chest to chest. If I bridge them hard enough in one direction, I'm giving them a choice. Okay, you can keep this pin, but if you lock on to me tight, you're not going to have a post to base out. And when that happens, I'm going to take you over. So what usually a good experienced opponent will do is, as they feel off balanced, they will open their hands and they will post their hands on the floor. When this happens, there's going to be an opportunity for the bottom player to get back to inside position, whether it's a frame or an underhook or whatever. And then from there, the bottom player needs to continuously remain in this moving cycle of defense until they get the majority of the inside frames back. And then that is truly when you're going to recover your guard or go into a wrestle up or whatever kind of recovery you want to do from the bottom position. So Kuzushi from the bottom is crucial to escaping pins because it allows you to off balance your opponent and start winning back the battle for inside position with frames and underhooks and whatever. Okay. So how are we going to create Kuzushi mechanically? What does this look like? It's so easy for me as a coach to be like, okay, off balance your opponent. And if you're a day one white belt, you're going to be like, what does that mean? What does that mean? If you go to a judo class, they'll do they'll do like uchikomi, which is basically you're just practicing your entries, right? Like if you're going to be doing turn throws like uchimadas and things, a lot of this revolves around doing some fancy footwork, looks like a dance, and we're going to step and start to turn and pull our opponent onto one foot. And a lot of time as we turn, we're also accenting our hands in such a way. In judo, we over-exaggerate the movement actually to really get big Kuzushi. And we're trying to rotate our partner's shoulders as we're trying to get them onto one foot, okay? Or depending on the throw, sometimes what it'll be is it'll be like a push. And then as they stumble back, generally they will now recompose their base by pushing back into you. And then as they do that, we do a big pull. So a push and a pull, right? These types of movements. Sometimes we can create Kuzushi with circling, right? Like we'll take a step to the side, creating an angle and a big pull. And what this does is it makes our partner take a step. So we're using multi-directional forces and attacking in opposite directions. I'm a big fan of Shintaro Higashi, who is he's like a Koro belt, a red and white belt in judo. I don't know what rank he is. I think he's like a 7th or 8th degree judo black belt. And he's a jiu-jitsu black belt as well. He did train under John Danaher. Now he trains at Essential Jiu-Jitsu with JT Torres. Shintaro, I have one of his instructionals. It's called Mastering Judo Concepts and Combinations. And all the instructional is it shows combinations for throws that work well together. So if I know that I can attack someone in 2 different directions, generally they're opposite directions. Because when I push, you push. When I pull, you pull. So if I can work in these opposite directions and pair throws together in these opposite directions, I can have like a nice little series or a nice system that I can attack you with. For example, an Osotogari is a forward throw and a Sasai Surikomiashi is a backwards throw. So these throws naturally work well together. Another combination would be like a Seyanagi, which is a turn throw, and an Ochigari, which is a forward an inside trip essentially. So these throws work in opposite directions. They work well with each other. So I'm always trying to create misdirection in this push-pull, getting an action-reaction. When I push into you, if you're moving backwards, I have not yet gotten you to react. If I feel you taking steps back, yes, you're stumbled backwards, but you're not reacting. Then I feel you engage your muscles. I feel you push back into me. That's the time to go for a forward throw. That's the time to create that action reaction. I'm looking for that reaction. Or let's say I'm wrestling now, no gi, and I have a collar tie on you and I want to snap you down, which means I need you to push back into me. I need your head committed, nose over toes, but I'm pushing you back and you're not committing to that yet. You're taking steps backward, but then I finally feel you push back into me. That's the reaction that we're looking for to hit a nice snap down into a front headlock or whatever, right? So these are the reactions we're trying to create. We're pushing and pulling, an action reaction. And this, again, can translate to the floor. When I'm in bottom half guard knee shield, I'm pushing and pulling, pumping with my knees, just trying to make the person feel uncomfortable. And a lot of the time what we're looking for is their head to move around and their hands to become extended to the floor, or for their legs to widen as they must recompose their balance. Right? We're trying from the standing position. I'm trying to use footwork a lot of the time to move my partner around. Like I said, when we're circling to angles and we're pulling, our opponent now must come with us. If they don't take those extra steps, they're just going to fall on the floor. So a good rule of thumb when we're standing or when we're playing guarded positions is trying to make our opponent stumble. If they have to take steps, we're doing our job in off balancing them. Okay. A lot of the time in jiu-jitsu, it's true that jiu-jitsu guys aren't the greatest takedown fighters. It is not 100% necessary in the IBJJF rule set to be excellent at throws or takedowns because we can just pull guard. But you'll see guys grab each other's collars or collar sleeve grips and they'll just lock on and their feet don't move. So not a whole lot of throwing is going to happen, especially when we're tied up like 50-50 grips. You have to now use the mat space and run around with your footwork to make them stumble. If you're doing that, you are creating Kuzushi. You are now in the offensive cycle. Or if I start kicking at someone's legs with foot sweeps, even if I'm not excellent at foot sweeps, if I'm threatening their feet by kicking them and making them step, a lot of the time a guy will just pull guard because it's uncomfortable to have somebody making you stumble. Using foot sweeps is a fantastic way to create reactions. So circling with your feet, attacking feet with foot sweeps, just even if you're not great at foot sweeps, you just make them react. This is a lot of the time going to make them take steps back, and then they have hollow hips and we can snap them down. So one of the most fundamental takedowns, if you want to call it, is attacking a foot sweep. And when they get that, when we get that reaction where they step back, snapping them into the space where their foot once was. It takes no real skill or athletic ability to do this. You just have to practice it a couple of times. And it's a very good, safe way to get someone's hands onto the floor. So yeah, again, we can use footwork. We can use grips on our partner's shoulders. Generally, the grips in judo are going to be collar sleeve. Okay, there's different variations, but as a general rule, if I'm grabbing someone's collar, I want my hand higher on the lapel. Even the best would be like behind the neck. Okay, so the higher my hand is on my partner's lapel, the more control I have over their posture, right? And then the hand on the sleeve, or, sometimes people like to grab down by the cuff. Other times people like to grab up by the elbow. What are the pros and cons of this grip? If you grab up by the elbow, you're going to create more pulling movement, but your partner will have more freedom with their hand. If you grab down by the hand, they have less freedom because you have their cuff, but it's going to take more Kuzushi to turn their shoulders. So the grip on the sleeve essentially manipulates your partner's shoulders. The grip on the collar manipulates your partner's head. And so we can use these two grips together to rotate the axis of their shoulders. And when you do this, when you twist someone's spine, you're breaking their posture. It's breaking someone's posture does not necessarily mean snapping down or pulling them down, although often that is what we're doing. We're just trying to manipulate their spinal column, whether it's a snap down, whether it's a spinal rotation, anything we can do to twist their body and manipulate their shoulder line is good. You'll notice that as you start to rotate your partner's shoulders, generally the weight comes off of one of their feet, and in this case, they're off balanced. This is what we're always looking to do when we're looking for turn throws, different variations of wrestling and takedowns, just opening opportunities for us to get into actual techniques, okay? Let's talk about our partner's center of gravity. All right. Think about this. Your partner's pillars of support, usually if they're standing position, it's going to be their 2 feet, right? Their pillars of support from the standing position. Your partner always wants to keep their head in dead center of those 2 feet. So if we drew a line when I was standing from the top of my head down to the floor, it would land right below my belt knot, right in between my 2 feet. What we were always looking to do with our partner's head position is manipulate it past the pillars of support. So if I'm standing here and you push my head over my foot, if you push my head further over my foot, I now need to either stumble with my other leg to catch myself, or I'm going to need to post my hand on the floor. This is so critical to doing really any techniques in jiu-jitsu. Moving somebody's head over their base of support is Kuzushi. And I'm always looking to just move someone's head around with my collar grip. If I'm standing, snapping them down, bringing their nose over their toes, they'll be susceptible to snapping them down and entering front heads and whatnot. Just trying to move their head and their center mass past their pillars of support so that they have to post, they have to stumble. It creates limb extension. If I'm on the bottom position playing guard, this is what I need to create limb extension, which opens up sweeps and submissions. Right? If you want to hit an armbar from the bottom, if your partner's head is straight over their center mass, you're not going to be armbarring anyone. You're going to get your guard passed after you go for that armbar. But if I can make you post your arm on the floor, now that arm is fully extended. And again, so it's like I'm giving you an offering. I'm giving you a choice. Okay, do you want to fall over, or do you want to post your hand out and potentially give me an attack? right? This is the offering that we're giving our partner through Kuzushi by breaking their stance. So just to reiterate, what are the signs that I am doing a good job in creating Kuzushi? My opponent cannot attack because they're too busy regaining their stance. From the top position, from the standing position, standing versus standing, this looks like my opponent stumbling. Or even in extreme cases, they had to post their hands on the floor, which would be excellent. If my opponent puts their hands on the floor in any situation, this is good for me. Why is this so important? Doesn't matter if I'm in the guard position, doesn't matter if I'm in the standing position. If my opponent is posting their hands on the floor, that means their hands are not attacking me. Their hands are not controlling me. So that is so critical to understand. I'll say it again. If your opponent's hands are on the floor, they are not controlling you or attacking you. It's hard for them to put pressure on you when their hands are on the floor because they are too busy regaining their balance. Again, this opportunity won't last long. Everybody is going to try and posture back up and get back to a neutral position. So again, we just keep shaking them down, putting their weight onto their hands. If I was going to attack the turtled position, for example, one of the biggest things I want to do is maintain height advantage. If I don't put weight on my partner's head and hands, they're just going to stand up vertically and start escaping the turtle position. So much of what we do when we attack the turtle is keep their partner broken down and put your weight on your partner's hands. A lot of the time, this looks like we're going head over head. One of my favorite controls is the thigh pry, where I put my hand inside my partner's leg and I rotate my palm out and I just lean forward. And then from here, I like to post my hand on the mat and I just ride my partner here so that the whole time they're carrying my weight. A great instructional to learn how to do really effective riding is Power Ride by Craig Jones. I think it's Power Ride, a new philosophy of pins. It's such a great instructional, okay? Just really good at controlling somebody and keeping them broken down so that they cannot build height. If your opponent's stumbling or hopping on one foot, we are doing a good job in creating Kuzushi. The hands are on the floor. We talked about limb extension and why that is so important for all of our attacks. You understand that your opponent can't grip you when their hands are preoccupied, when their hands are posting on the floor. If you're stumbling your partner around in the standing position and trying to get dominant grips, this is so important for judo. I could say, okay, get dominant grips on your opponent. And then we shake hands and we both just grab each other's collars. And it's like, okay, now we're locked in 50-50. Nobody's throwing each other. It's going to be very boring for spectators. It's not very effective. But if I say, okay, you need to grip your opponent's jacket and move, you'll be amazed that even if I get my partner's collar and I start using footwork to cover distance and I shake them around the room, they aren't able to re-grip you. It seems like your opponent should be able to just reach out and grab you while you're doing this, but they can't. Why? Because their hands naturally come away from their body. So as you're shaking someone, moving them around, you'll realize quickly how hard it is to re-grip someone when you're in a state of off balance. All right. Your hands just can't do it because you're constantly just trying to catch your own balance, right? And again, if we're wrestling, if we're looking to get to underhooks or body locks, one of the best ways we can do this is stumble someone so that their hands come away from their body. You will notice quickly attacks become more effective everywhere when you put your opponent in a constant state of Kuzushi. So let's talk about how we can actually build skills in creating Kuzushi, right? Like if I'm an instructor and I'm trying to tell my students, okay, off balance your opponent, they're going to look at you and be like, what does that even mean, right? What are some ways that we can actually build those skills? Task-focused games, or fuck your jiu-jitsu, as Rob would call it. Task-focused games are so important. So like, a good thing that I could do would be, okay, I'm going to ask you guys to grab grips on your opponent and make them stumble. If you can make them stumble, you're winning. If I can make my partner take steps, I'm winning, okay? If I'm in the bottom position, playing guard, I just want to see how many times I can make my partner put their hands on the floor. And we could add different constraints. So we could say the top player's goal is just to hang out and try and put pressure on the bottom player, like just lean on them while we try and off balance them. Or we could say, okay, top player, I want you to try and get chest to chest. We could say, top player, I want you to try and pass the guard. We could give different goals for the top player, and the bottom player is just trying to put their hands on the floor, right? And then we could even add different constraints for the bottom player. Okay, now the bottom player is allowed to sweep, or the bottom player is allowed to sweep or submit, blah, blah, blah. It's never ending with the amount of constraints you want to put in. But one of the biggest things we need to get the bottom player to do is get the top player to put hands on the floor. We could say, okay, we're working from the top position now. And now what I want you guys to do is fight for underhooks. So a lot of the time what people will do is they'll just do like the wrestling pummeling drill, which is great. But if I grab a collar tie and I start jerking you around with my footwork and snapping your head over your base of support, a lot of time your arm comes up and I can punch underhooks, right? So if we can move our partner's head around, we're creating Kuzushi. If we can get them to bring their arms away from their body, we're creating Kuzushi. If we can rotate their shoulders, we're creating Kuzushi. If we can make them stumble, we're creating Kuzushi. So I always try and like visualize my partner's skeleton, almost like you would see in an X-ray. And I want to see if I can manipulate their head over their center of gravity. If I can like move their body off to the side, or if I can rotate them, right? You're just trying to look at your partner's body as levers, and how can we manipulate those levers to twist their spine or bring their head over their base of support. Always preface your moves with some kind of attack on your opponent's stance. Your attacks should always be related to creating an off balance on your opponent's stance before you actually do said moves, right? And yeah, we can also look at different ways that we can shut down our opponent's Kuzushi. So that is another way is like if I'm on top passing your guard, another way to think of this is, okay, now I'm on top. I know my opponent is very good on the bottom. He's going to try and off balance me. What are ways that I can sort of shut down their Kuzushi? Well, first of all, very basic is just have a good stance. Okay. If your stance is not very effective for the scenario that you're in, you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage. So as a beginner, one of the main things you should be doing is finding your stance and then finding ways to maintain that stance as you're in motion, as you're trying to achieve whatever goal you're trying to achieve in that moment. And it will be tiring at first, but we just want to become comfortable in our stance. Take away your opponent's energy. So one thing that I've been doing lately is really gamifying guard passing. And I'm doing this during rounds. So I always have students come up to me and they're like, man, when I try and pass your guard, I get really, really tired and I'm frustrated. And then I say, okay, what is your goal? And they say, well, I want to pass your guard, or I want to get chest to chest. And I'm like, okay, when I roll with people in the gym right now, my goal is not to pass their guard. My goal lately, I've just been gamifying all my training. Once I come on top, is I just want to lean on your frames. I want you to frame as much as I can possibly get you to do. And I'm trying to avoid off balances and entanglements. So if I let you off balance me, for me, that's a loss. If I let you get to an ashigarami, for me, that's a loss. But I'm not frustrating myself because my goals are so, they're in like the first stage of defensive cycle. I'm putting you in a defensive cycle, but I'm not like, I need to pass the guard. I need to get chest to chest. That's when, if I fail, I'm going to get frustrated and I'm going to get tired. I'm going to get mentally defeated. But if my goal is so basic, if it's just, okay, don't get entangled, don't get off balance and make them frame, I'm basically just holding you as if I'm setting pieces on a chessboard and I'm not letting you move, right? I've used this analogy on the show before. In chess, it's not like I'm just going to try and rush in and take all your pieces, because I will leave myself exposed. And as the game goes on, I will not be positionally sound on the board, and I will be susceptible to counterattack. Whereas if I spend the first, 10, 20 moves on the chessboard just to set up my pieces, now as the game progresses, it's going to be harder and harder for my opponent to penetrate through my defenses because I've taken the time to set myself up. So I'm kind of doing that in jiu-jitsu. As the time goes on, as the round goes on, I'm spending large amounts of time just leaning on my opponent's frames. Okay. And when that happens, I'm winning. It's undeniable. I'm winning. If my opponent can't attack me, if they can't entangle me or off balance me, and they're just carrying the weight of my pressure, they're having issues now, right? When the bottom player is dealing with pressure, they can kind of address it in two different ways. They can push into the pressure and create frames. So the force vector is coming at them and they align their frames to match that force vector. Or they can try to redirect my force vector into a different position. And generally what this looks like is I'm stumbled and I have to now post my hands on the floor. This is an ideal situation for the bottom player. Okay. So One thing I've been doing that's really, really effective is let's take the split squat position for an example. I'm in the half guard, I pop up into the split squat, I'm putting pressure. Usually my partner has a knee shield and I'm driving weight forward. What I want to do is just drape my body onto my partner's frames, but if they try to manipulate my balance, generally what they're going to do, they're going to go into a deep half, or they're going to go into a kiss of the dragon, or they're just going to try and redirect me overhead so they can enter my legs. So now I'm waiting for that reaction. I'm putting pressure into them. I feel them frame on me. I'm like, good, I'm winning. They're framing on me. Now, when my opponent starts to off balance me overhead, I actually will take my hands and thumb post, armpit thumb post, throat post. Guys, if you're not using the throat post as a passing tool, you're really denying yourself of one of the most effective frames ever. When I throat post you, you cannot do kiss of the dragon. You cannot do choi bars. You cannot go into deep half. And you can't pull me on top of you in any way because I'm physically framing on you. Then, as I feel them stop trying to elevate me and move me around, I drive my head back into them and I'm just driving in with that pressure. So I'm constantly cycling on top between pressure coming in and pulling myself away. Pressure coming in, pulling myself away. So if you haven't felt this, what it feels like on the bottom is it feels like you're trying to frame on someone to make space, but you can't create space. And then as you try and move them, they disappear. But then as soon as you stop trying to move them, they come right back in with their pressure. So the bottom player is constantly playing this game of framing, trying to off balance, framing, trying to off balance, and they're getting frustrated. And as time goes on, they're getting tired. Me on top, remember I said earlier, I'm not making my goal to pass your guard, right? Passing the guard is fucking hard. It takes a lot of steps. So my goal now is no longer just pass the guard. My goal is just to wear on my opponent's frames and make them carry me. And every time they try and create Kuzushi, I shut them down. Then I come right back in. I just lean on their frames. You do this for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, your partner's guard starts to melt. That is when you start to see battles to the inside position like underhooks and inside knee, inside your partner's hips. Positions like this start to show up now. So just organically, your guard passes will show up. And this comes to the idea of like setting up your pieces on a chessboard or using exhaustion as a weapon against your opponent while you're shutting down their Kuzushi. They're just on the bottom thinking like, fuck, I know I can't move this guy. I know that I can't create the limb extension. There's no openings for me to get into the offense. I can't even recover my position. I can't even recover to a neutral position. This is very morally defeating for the bottom person. And then they start to quit. And then that's when openings start to happen. Another thing that I do on top to shut down my opponent's Kuzushi from the bottom is hand fight. So when I was, even up till recently, when I was on top trying to create pressure, I wouldn't think about the hand fighting aspect from the top. We're always taught on the bottom, okay, look for grips. Okay, look for grip, like grab 2-on-1s on the wrist, grab the, arm drag grip, grab a collar, whatever. You need grips from the bottom. But very few people talk about gripping from the top. So when I'm on top, another great way to gamify like shutting down Kuzushi is always just try and grab one of your opponent's wrists and then have your other hand either in a throat post or a collar tie. It's amazing what will actually happen to your guard passing when you start to add this element of hand fighting. This element of hand fighting is very, very similar to standing wrestling exchanges. Wrist gripping, looking for underhooks, collar ties. This is all very much related. I actually was introduced to this idea of gripping from the top by watching some of Kit Dale's instructionals. I don't have his instructional. Sorry, Kit, I didn't buy it. But on YouTube, he's got some free videos where he talks about task-focused games. One of the task-focused games is just putting pressure on your partner and just trying to pin their wrist as much as you can. Guys, when you cover your partner's wrist, doesn't matter what position, standing position, rear mount position, if I am behind my opponent on their back, and their hands are controlling my hands, I can't strangle them and they have dominant hand position. I always want my hands on top of their hands. When my hands are on top of my partner's hands, that is when I'm going to be able to, be successful in controlling my partner. And when you're on the bottom and your hands are pinned to your chest, you can't even begin to frame. So your focus becomes not about getting your frames back in order. Your focus becomes you're now focused towards just freeing your fucking hands. Okay. So as I'm wrist pinning from the top and throat posting and collar tying and doing all these things, I'm also taking away space with my chest, my head. And the whole time the person on the bottom is just bunched up. All they want to do is get back to a box frame, right? They just want to get a cross shoulder post, but now their arm is pinned to their body and they're stuck. It's so hard to off balance somebody when they're pinning your wrists. So I really recommend that you guys try to, when you're on top, don't even try to pass the guard. Gamify the situation and try and just pin your partner's wrist from the top and grab their head. And as they're clearing these grips, you just keep pinning wrists, pinning the wrist away from the body, pinning the wrist inside into their chest, and then driving pressure into them. And you'll see that their guard actually starts to fold. By hand fighting from the top, you gain an offensive cycle that's super, super valuable because the bottom person's main tools to control you, their hands, are now compromised. So again, this is something that I've been working on a lot lately. I've also been inspired by Joseph Chan watching this. Very, very effective. So just to recap that whole scenario, when you're on top, shutting down Kuzushi from the bottom, pinning wrists, grabbing the throat, collar tying, your hands can cycle, right? I can move my hands around to different wrist pins and different collar ties as my opponent's hand fighting. And then I put pressure on my partner and I try and crash the shoulder with my head. When they try and off balance me, which everyone will, I now go throat post and armpit post, and I just push myself back. Then I come in, then I'm back, then I'm in, back, in. Constantly hips in, hips out, head down. Head comes up, hips go in, head goes down, hips come out, right? And I'm just, you could watch Joseph Chan fight Harrison Woods at the last Polaris event. You could see him doing this weird like dipping movement. And I was like, why is he doing that? Well, he's cycling the leading edge. His head is coming in. Then as the frames are coming in on his chest, he's posturing up. So it's like you're trying to frame on your opponent and they posture up and you're like, fuck, my frames are useless. My opponent just disappeared. And this gives you an opportunity to now pin a wrist down and drive your head back in. So it's just this constant pressure from the top player that just really wears your opponent down. And then this will lead you into more successful guard passes as time goes on. Right? If I don't have those setups, if I don't wear my opponents down with exhaustion first, then I try and do my guard passes. My guard passes are going to be ineffective because my opponent has energy to defend. But if I break my opponent down first and I wear them down over time, you're going to realize like, oh, the guard passes are way easier to do. When I pass my partner's guard, it's way easier to hold my opponent down because they have less energy. When I go into submissions, it's way harder for them to defend because they have less energy to defend. They're already depleted, right? So again, wearing your partner down. When I'm, okay, what are we talking about here? Yeah, this just reiterates forcing them into a defensive cycle. So another way that we can create Kuzushi from the top, like let's say I'm looking for underhooks, right? One thing I can do is I can grab my partner's head and force it to the floor. So if I'm standing over my opponent and they're in the seated guard, I can create Kuzushi from the top now by grabbing their head and just throwing it to the side. When this happens, their head is going to go over their hips and they have to post their hand on the mat. If you like tripod passing or body lock passing, this is like one of the best ways to get underhooks, right? Force your partner's head over their center of gravity and over their pillar of support. Boom, body locks can come in or underhook can come in. And this will give you, again, ways to get to the inside position, right? That's it. So guys, I mean, just to reiterate everything, Kuzushi, we always want to break our opponent's balance and get them by stumbling them or making them post their hand on the floor, moving their head around, manipulating their spine, twisting their shoulders. These are all ways we can create Kuzushi. We can do it with our hands, with big pulling movements, pushing their partner over, grabbing their wrist, grabbing their gi, whatever we want to do. Or we can make them step. So we can use footwork to make our partner step. What we don't want to do is grip our partner and not move our feet at all. It's just like striking, right? If I'm here, I could hit really fucking hard. But if I only know how to plant my feet and punch, yeah, I can hit hard, but I'm going to get hit a lot. Really masterful striking is when we can move and hit, but not get hit. And that comes from the idea of educating our feet. And honestly, talking about footwork probably deserves an episode all of its own. But if you don't have good footwork, your grappling is going to suffer, your takedowns will suffer, and your striking will suffer. Okay, we talked about what Kuzushi is. How is this revolutionary concept kind of developed by Jigoro Kano to first attack your opponent's stance, their base posture structure, before you launch your attack. This creates good opportunities to attack. It's a small window of attack. We want to take advantage of it, and we want to create action reaction, right? Playing two different directions at the simultaneously. How can we do this? Well, we can, I just explained, using our footwork, moving our partner around. We can gamify it by setting little task-focused games where our goal is only to get our partner stumbled, or to make your goal, okay, I want you to get to a front headlock or a body lock or a single leg. Like, these are the specific positions we're looking for. We're not even doing takedowns. We're just trying to break our opponent's stance and get to these positions. If I'm playing a guarded position, I want to get my partner's hands on the floor, get them extended as much as I can, while preventing them from getting chest to chest or whatever constraint you've set up. If I'm on top and I want to gamify this, I could say, okay, I want you to put pressure on your partner and look for underhooks without getting entangled. Like, that would be a great game to play from the top position. And we also went into a whole explanation about wrist pinning and creating pressure from the top while forcing our partner into exhaustion, which is incredibly important. So really what this is, guys, when we create Kuzushi, is we're talking about truly entering the offensive cycle and putting our opponent into a defensive cycle. And as always, we want to maximize the amount of time that we can do this. This is going to show you that moves just organically show up as we do this, rather than like looking for moves that we know. So when I'm fighting my opponent, I don't want to just do that move that I know, an armbar from guard or whatever, and they're fully postured up, and you try and do the armbar and they just throw your legs to the side and pass your guard. You attacked somebody with a move, but they had a good stance. So train yourself to see their stance and look for cues to break their stance. And once their stance is broken, train yourself to now immediately launch your attack, or as they recover their stance, we have follow-ups to break their stance in the opposite direction. Okay, guys, I've definitely gone over Kuzushi enough, and I hope it was useful for you. I hope it wasn't too boring, and I hope it wasn't too repetitive. Guys, if you want to support the show, check out the links in the bottom. Consider subscribing to my online academy. Please like, share, subscribe to the show. Leave comments if you can. Also, I just wanted to mention that I now have a new YouTube channel, which is my On Guard BJJ Online. All right, and this is where I will release a free lesson every week that I teach in my gym. And I really recommend you guys check it out. Please, again, like, share, subscribe to that channel as well. Share it with your friends, your teammates, whatever, if you like it. And I really appreciate you guys checking me out. And I hope that, you go to the gym and you are now thinking about, okay, before I do anything, I need to make sure that my partner's stance is compromised. Just that little cue will really increase the effectiveness of almost everything you do. Doesn't matter what position, from the top, from the bottom, from standing position. Guys, get Kuzushi-ing your partners. All right, I'm going to sign out. Take care, you guys. Remember, Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. See you later.